I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. Hey everyone, welcome to our very first episode of the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. I'm Alice and joined as always with my brilliant and joined as always with my co-host, the brilliant Brett.
Hello, Alice. This is so exciting.
We're doing it. We're finally doing it.
Yeah.
You know, we kind of forced the issue when we recorded that teaser episode in our other feed that said we were going to have another podcast when in fact we had not recorded anything. But you know, it forces a deadline and it forces you to actually record. So I guess I'm glad we did that.
Too late to back out now. We're on the record that we're going to do it. I mean, this may be the only episode we ever do. So
it's very possible. Well, you know, you guys set this up very well for us because for months at this point, what is this, a month and a half, 6 weeks, you guys have been asking us to cover the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard defamation trial. And
we've been saying no.
We've been saying no.
We will not do it.
And so instead of doing it in our regular show, we decided why not? If the people ask for it, we'll give it to them. We'll just have to do it
start
in
a whole new
show. Exactly. So if you don't like this show and you ask for any analysis about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, then you can, I guess, blame yourselves.
There you go. And if you hate this show, we do have another show called The Prosecutors where we cover true crime. And none of this like crazy breaking news stuff. So, and those of you who came over from that show, I hope you enjoy this one as much as you've enjoyed the other. It's a new adventure for us. And I got to say, I'm nervous, Alice. I'm nervous about it.
Yeah, I'm really nervous as well. You know, what exactly does it mean to have the breaking news hot takes for true crime? So we're not covering the news like the headlines of all the news, but rather any breaks in any of the true crime cases that you guys may follow that we may cover on our other show. And also, there's just so much going on at all times. You know, they find a new clue, a new body, a new confession, new DNA. And if you see that and you want to hear about in, you know, real time, what's going on, why did the police release what they released, what does this mean for the case, what does this mean for the investigation, the prosecution, you know, write us, let us know, and we'll probably cover it on the next week's episode because just like our other show, this isn't scripted. It really is just us talking about what we think is happening and how these cases develop as these new tips and these new pieces of evidence are released.
Yeah, and I think this show is going to be a lot more, I mean, the other show is not scripted, but this is going to be even more unscripted. This is a much more of a discussion. So I don't know. We're going to figure it out as we go along. And I think the best thing to do is just to dive into the trial of the century, Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard. And I think it's important to just say at the very beginning what this is about. This is not an abuse trial. You hear a lot of people say this is a trial about domestic abuse, and that is a topic, but this is a defamation case. That's what this is. This is Johnny Depp saying that Amber Heard, by writing an op-ed saying that he abused her without ever using her name, but that doesn't actually protect you from defamation. And those of you who follow the Delphi case, who always use the initials because for some reason you think that's going to save you from defamation, doesn't work that way. So everybody knew that Amber Heard was talking about Johnny Depp in that op-ed, and so he is now suing her, basically saying it was all a lie, he was defamed, it cost him a ton of money, and he wants his day in court. Amber Heard has countersued against Johnny Depp and said that by denying the fact that he abused her, he defamed her, called her a liar, cost her a lot of money, and there's been a lot of testimony about exactly how much money was cost from who and when in this trial.
Yeah, Brett, that's so good to clear it up because I think the clips, I think TikTok has just been exploding with clips of what's happening on the stand and, snippets of what the attorneys are saying. And a lot of people think that this entire trial is about abuse, physical, emotional, verbal abuse in a relationship, but in fact, that's not it at all. So, what exactly is defamation? What is the legal standard that you have to meet in order to win a suit for defamation? Well, first of all, we usually talk about true crime, criminal cases. It's very important to note that defamation is a civil suit. So, whoever wins, if anyone wins here, nobody goes to jail. This is not restraining anyone's liberty in that sense, but rather it's for money damages. Well, Brett, let's talk about the standard for defamation because it's extremely difficult for a public figure to win a defamation suit. And you can imagine why. A public figure is known to a lot more people than they know directly. And so when you typically have defamation, you're talking about two private individuals. They know each other. Like you and I know each other. So if I'm saying something about you, you know who I am and what that means in saying it against you. But, I don't know, Prince William, who's a public figure, doesn't know me from Eve. And so you can imagine why the standard is higher for him to win a defamation suit against a nobody. And so public figures are just known and they put themselves out there. And we could talk more about what exactly is a public figure and, what factors are considered to see whether someone is in fact a public figure. But for defamation, you must show that a false and defamatory statement about the public figure, that there was communication of that statement to a third party, and there was a tendency to harm the public figure's reputation in the community, and the defendant acted with, quote, actual malice. Actual malice means that the person made the statement knowing that it was false, or they should have known it was false, for the very purpose of harming the person. So no, this is not a mistake of, I didn't know and I just spoke facts that I thought were true, but they ended up being false. You have to actually know or should have known it was false.
And actual malice is not something that you need if the person's not a public figure. It's one of the reasons it's so hard to win against a public figure because, as Alice said, you have a public figure who's known by a lot of people. There's a lot of information out there about them. A lot of that information is false, but you don't know that. So if you repeat that information or you publish that information, you're not trying to hurt them. You're not purposely saying something that's false. The should have known, things can get kind of squishy with should have known, but it's still a pretty high bar. And I think it's really, really important for people to realize we're not just saying it's a little harder. It is almost impossible to win a defamation suit in the United States against a public figure. Alice and I had the pleasure of seeing a presentation by the two attorneys who had represented one of the people in the Rolling Stone, University of Virginia defamation case. You guys may recall this 5, 6, 7 years ago. There was an article in Rolling Stone magazine about a gang rape that supposedly happened at the University of Virginia, and it turns out it was entirely fabricated. The young lady who was interviewed as part of that article had some real issues, some mental issues, and she made it up. She made it up out of whole cloth. And there were signs. Rolling Stone should have known that this was defamation. And yet they went ahead and published this, and they really targeted one of the people at the university who worked with women and men who had suffered some sort of sexual assault. And they really targeted this person. And the court decided that she was what is often called a limited purpose public figure. So you can be a public figure for the purpose of a defamation lawsuit, even if you're not famous. And this woman had given an interview in the school newspaper about the resources the university offered to people who'd had sexual assault or had suffered sexual assault. And that made her a limited purpose public figure for the purpose of this article. And that made it much more difficult for her attorneys to win. A lot of these cases don't even get past summary judgment or a motion to dismiss. They never make it to trial. But in that case, they did make it to trial and they won, which was a very rare thing. This case is another circumstance where you have two people who are both public figures suing each other for defamation, and it's going to be extremely difficult for them, either one of them, to prove what they need to prove in order to win. And one of the reasons is if any part of what they're saying is true, then the other one's going to lose. So, for instance, Amber Heard has said that Johnny Depp abused her. This is a very broad term. What exactly is abuse? Mental abuse, physical abuse, psychological abuse, a lot of different kinds of abuse. She may be lying about specific instances of abuse, but really all she has to do is convince the jury that Johnny Depp was in some way abusive to her so that her op-ed wasn't completely false, and she is probably going to win her side of the lawsuit.
Absolutely. So if this is the case, if we all know that defamation is such a hard case to win, why was this brought? Because so much money is being spent on this trial. This is what, a 6-week trial, Brett? I know they took some breaks in there, but this trial has gone on for weeks and weeks and weeks. That is attorneys' hours that are being billed. This is everything from your, paying your witnesses to come and travel and spend a lot of money just quite literally living there. Like those of you who've gone to trial know that it is an all-out affair. You essentially move in to wherever your trial is taking place. You have a war room. A war room could be something as simple as a hotel room or a conference room if you have a very big trial team, where all of your legal team gets together and works day in and day out. Every minute you're not in court, you're basically in the war room. There are printers, there are computers.
They have multiple experts.
You have multiple experts. I mean, experts are incredibly expensive because they are charged by the hour. It's just not the hours that they're sitting on the stand, but the hours of prep, the hours of creating their expert opinion, which you have to turn over to the other side in advance of trial. I mean, there is just so much money that goes into trying this case. And of course, the damages that each side is asking for is in the tens of millions. So it's a lot of money they're asking for. But that's not why they're doing this, Brett. There's no way that they are doing this in hopes of, this is like gambling for, getting $10 million at the end of the suit. This is not why they are doing it. So, Brett, we've talked about this when people have asked us one-off, but why are they doing this if it is so hard to win a defamation suit and it's costing money out of their pockets in order to try this immensely large and expensive trial?
This is all about their reputation. I mean, this is not about winning. The chances that either one of them are going to win are minuscule in my view. I don't think either one of them is going to win. I think the jury is most likely to come back and say, neither one of you proved your case, or, okay, fine, you proved it, here's $5,000. De minimis damages is something that often happens in cases like this, where the jury says, okay, fine, you proved your case, but we're not going to give you a whole bunch of money for this because, we just don't think it's worth it. This is all about their reputation. Johnny Depp is doing this to rebuild his reputation. I think one thing that has definitely been proven in this case, and I don't think anybody doubted, is that when this came out, it was a big blow to Johnny Depp. It cost him some movie roles. It made people view him in a negative light. He's a leading man. He carries films on his back. And to have this attack on him is going to cause immense damage to his reputation. That's where sort of the monetary damage has come from, but it's not really about that. He doesn't want money from Amber Heard. I mean, I'm sure he'd be fine taking it if he got it, but this is about rebuilding his reputation, and I think he's done a really good job of that. I think if you look at the portrayal of these two people in the media, Johnny Depp has won the media fight here, and I don't know exactly why that is. Some of it may be misogyny. Some of it may just be that maybe he's a better actor or he just comes across better. I pulled a picture from one of the articles and I've seen this picture 1,000 times, and every time I see it, I think there is just a visual depiction of how biased the media coverage or one-sided the media coverage has been in this case. And it's a picture, it's a side-by-side of the two of them. And Johnny Depp is smiling and looking dashing and movie star-ish and kind of side-eyeing at the camera. And then there's a picture of Amber Heard looking like she is insane. She's obviously in the stand. She's probably looking at the jury, and she just looks like she is about to rip someone's face off. And the two pictures could not be more different. And the signal they send to anybody who looks at them is Johnny Depp, innocent guy, Amber Heard, crazy person who's accusing this poor innocent filmmaker or innocent actor of abusing her when in fact she's the one who was vicious and cruel and angry and unstable. I mean, we'll put this picture on the website because it's just crazy to look at it and think about all that is carried in this photo. And it's really a testament to how powerful the way the media has described this case and the effect that has had on public opinion. And it will be interesting to hear from the jury who's not supposed to be following what the media says. Hopefully they're not. They're not supposed to be. It will be interesting to see what they think about the trial that they've been watching for the last 6 weeks versus the way the trial has been presented to people through the media.
Brett, I think you're absolutely right. This was brought to essentially reclaim the Johnny Depp reputation, and I don't think it was a roll of the dice for him. It was a very risky thing to move forward because we certainly are. It is an unpopular place for a woman who claims a man has abused her, for that same man to come out and try to flip the tables. I don't know in recent history where that's been successful, in fact. And so it was an absolute risk for him to do it. But I think he has a very good legal team around him. And the only reason not the only reason, I think a major reason that they have been able to prevail on kind of exonerating or cleansing his reputation and turning the public opinion to against Amber Heard is because of all the recordings that they had. So they had Amber Heard's own voice say pretty damning things that go against the claims that she's trying to bring here and against what she's testifying to. And you almost never have that in a defamation suit, where the person is essentially telling you their strategy in order to make the truth seem contorted. And that has happened in this case. And I think the other thing is the advent of TikTok, right? TikTok, I know, has been around for a while, but I don't think another trial or another case has been so heavily featured on TikTok. And it's a case made for TikTok because you have two parties who are very recognizable to the public. And so if you are scrolling on TikTok, they do studies on what makes your eye catch and stop on a particular TikTok video. And it's usually something that you recognize. You're automatically going to recognize two people who have been in a lot of news media coverage, but also in movies and in Hollywood. You can't help but be like, oh, that's Captain Jack Sparrow. And then you stop on the video. And the clips in a defamation trial, I think, are tailor-made for TikTok because it only takes a couple words. You don't need the whole sentence. You just need someone to say, I'm going to effing rip your throat out, or something along those lines for it to just grab someone's attention. And you don't even need the full story. And that's also why it's been a little bit difficult for people to follow this trial and know what's going on and know who's quote unquote winning, because we only see clips of it through TikTok. But at the end of the day, I think you're right, Brett. Defamation is just an incredibly high standard, and this case was never about meeting that legal standard. This case was always about getting their story out there in TikTok clips, in news media stories, in pictures, having pictures of people out there. Maybe they knew, how certain people would portray on the witness stand. And that's exactly what you see in these side-by-side pictures. It's what they thought, and I think they were correct, and how Amber Heard would react on the stand and how other very famous people would react on the stand when they come out in support or against one of those parties.
Yeah, and a couple things about that. I think you're absolutely right about TikTok. I mean, this case for TikTok's kind of like O.J. Simpson was for CNN. I mean, there were plenty of people who knew what TikTok was, cool people like us and young people, but now everybody knows what TikTok was because This case really has been all over TikTok. A lot of really funny things, really great, 1-minute videos on this. So I think you're right about that. The second thing, just the playing to the public. There's always thousands of people, maybe not thousands. There's a lot of people waiting for Johnny Depp. Every time he shows up, it's like a hero's welcome. You see that as much as you see anything that's going on in the courtroom. And most people who aren't paying a lot of attention, I think they have 100% taken away from this that Johnny Depp is in the right. I haven't watched all of it. I've watched a little bit of it. I will say, I thought Johnny Depp came off way better from the stand than Amber Heard. I don't know why that is, but I just think it's a fact. I just think he came off better. The other thing you mentioned is even the lawyers, I think, get it. They know what's going on here. And I'll give you an example of that. Amber Heard, towards the end of the trial, testified. They each testified multiple times because they're up on direct and they're up on the other side's case. It's interesting to see that happen. But she had been coached to look at the jury when she's answering her questions. A lot of really good witnesses, professional witnesses, law enforcement witnesses will do this. They'll get a question from the lawyer, then they'll turn and they'll talk to the jury because it's the jury who's making the decision. And they want to sort of build a rapport with the jury and make the jury see them as an individual, not just a witness spouting testimony. And so she did that a lot. And there'd been a lot of criticism of her online by people who supported Johnny Depp for doing it. And on the last day of trial, or close to the last day of trial, one of Johnny Depp's lawyers was cross-examining her, asked her a question. She turns and starts talking to the jury, and the lawyer says, "Don't do that. I asked you the question. Look at me." Right? Now, that was very clearly for Johnny Depp supporters out there in the world who were criticizing this. That's a pretty dangerous thing to do because the jury likes to be talked to. So you telling her, don't talk to the jury, that might be a good way to irritate the jury. But when you don't actually care about what the jury does in the end, it's effective. And she got a lot of praise for that because it was like, finally, they put her in her place and told her to stop doing that. And I think it's just an example of how this is very much a publicity thing, not a legal thing.
Absolutely. And one thing that I've noticed that doesn't typically happen in these trials is because they are both such public figures. I mean, Johnny Depp's name has been a household name for decades at this point, is they use both of their names repeatedly. Usually you'll use pronouns, you'll say the defendant or the plaintiff, but here, everything, especially from from Johnny Depp's side, is, well, Johnny Depp said, Mr. Depp said, Johnny Depp said, to remind people, like, remember this person that you've grown up with in the media that you love. I don't know if it's working with the jury. Like we said, the jury's a black box, and I do wonder how they've been able, if they were sequestered or how they've been able to be sequestered, because it seems like coverage of this trial is so prolific. I would, if I were Amber Heard's team, be very concerned that they have been following the TikTok videos and, unintentionally seeing it splashed across every single news media outlet for the past several months.
So I think the last thing to talk about in this, is there any deeper meaning to this case, or is this just an absolute disaster? And I'll take this in two parts. I'll be interested to hear what Alice thinks about this. But one thing I see, and you actually see this a lot, not just in this case, but in a lot of cases, and it bothers me, so I want to point out why, is people say things like, the fact that this is happening is setting back women's rights or the rights of people who are abused, or it's hurting abused people, or people who believe Johnny Depp are hurting abused women because why would an abused woman want to come forward? That is a concern, and I understand that concern, but let me say this. When you have a trial and there are two people, the case is really about those two people. If it is true, if everything Johnny Depp is saying is true, and he didn't abuse Amber Heard, and she defamed him and ruined his career, it's not Johnny Depp's fault that whatever is happening sort of in the meta world is happening. I think you really have to judge cases by what's going on with the litigants. And I don't really care what kind of case it is. If you have a criminal case and it's a political case and it's really a politicized case, you shouldn't hope for a verdict to help your sort of meta narrative. What should matter is the truth of that case. And then you can worry about the meta narrative later, but we don't use people as means to an end. That's not a good way to approach things. It's not a just way to approach things. The whole idea of justice is that you get justice as an individual based on your own actions and the truth of those actions, not based on, is it good sort of writ large that Johnny Depp loses, because that will have less of an effect on abused people in general. Or is it good that Johnny Depp wins, because that way more people will believe men who've been abused? Any of those things may be true, but it's not a reason to decide this case one way or the other, or I think to sort of have a rooting interest one way or another. And it always bothers me when people try and take cases or whatever and make them not about the truth of the situation, but to fit some big narrative. That's the first thing. The second thing I will say is the people who are worried about that are 100% right, because I think this trial is an absolute circus. I think both of these people have used the language and the experiences of people who have actually been abused to their advantage. I think probably both of these people are troubled and are abusive in their own way, and that this was an abusive relationship with a lot of abuse going back and forth. Drew Barrymore called it a 7-layer dip of insanity. She had to apologize about that. I have no idea why she had to apologize, because that is the best description of what we have seen happen in this trial.
Brett, I think that is such an insightful point you made, and it's very, very important. The law exists to mediate disputes between two parties, not to stand in for larger political debates or meta-narratives, like you said. And that's so important here, because at the end of the day, it is a party versus another party. It is not the world versus narratives. And there is a lot swinging back and forth, and so much has come out on both of them. Really, I can't imagine a life where I would have want to put any of these words I said, even to vindicate myself, into the public realm. But these two have done so, and like you said, there is a lot of abuse and a lot of words that are incredibly harsh, slinging back and forth, both from each party to the other. No one has complete clean hands here. With all that said, at the end of the day, I don't think defamation has been met in this case, and the jury is deliberating as we speak. So by the time you guys hear this episode, it's very possible. In fact, I think they will come back with either neither side winning, so the main claim and the counterclaim both lose, or they both win and something equal so that the amounts cancel each other out. So they each get some either small amount or a large amount, but they cancel each other out. So ultimately, they both leave with nothing and no real wins against the other. But I, again, don't think that is why Johnny Depp came to this trial. I do not believe that he brought this trial in order to actually recoup any lost earnings based on reputational harm. And Amber Heard counterclaimed because she realized they were going to trial, and she was not going to go down without a fight. And so she counterclaimed.
It's going to be funny when our first episode, we get it completely wrong.
It's very possible, but it just shows you that we're willing to be wrong.
Exactly. See, normally, the analysis you get is always after the fact, and so they're always right, because they always say, well, this is exactly what I expected to happen. So, I mean, of course, we're going to go back and edit this if we get it wrong and switch it around.
But no, we're not. We promise.
I think you're right, Alice.
You know.
I think you're 100% right.
Well, we'll see about that. I think the point is, again, you never know what the jury's thinking, and they are a black box, and they are not discussing this case until they get charged. So they've been charged, which just means you are read the jury charge, because the judge reads to the jury what their job is and what the standards are that they meet. And then they go back, and that's the first time they can deliberate about the facts they've been hearing for weeks at this time. And you may just have one person who's, very adamant on a different position than everybody else, and it may not be in line with maybe what the media's portrayed or what the majority of the room hears. And so we really mean this when we say a jury is a black box. So they will come back with something, but I really do think at the end of the day, it's going to be something that's null. Neither it's a draw. Neither side really wins. That's probably the right decision at the that's going to be the right decision here, based on the high standard to show defamation for a public figure.
Well, I think that's enough on Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. And what I think we meant by that is that Johnny Depp is going to win on all counts and get a whole bunch of money, and then Amber Heard is also going to win a count and not get that much money, especially since she's going to have to pay so much money to Johnny Depp. I think that is clearly the intention behind what we were saying. Does that sound right?
You had to really read between the lines of our previous conclusion, and if you missed it, maybe you just didn't listen hard enough.
I mean, look, Alice, I don't want to just spoon feed people.
No, not at all. Brett, we got it completely wrong.
We may have. We may have gotten it completely wrong.
But here's the thing. Here is the honesty of our discussion. We did not cut out what we originally predicted, even though we hadn't released it yet, because that really was our prediction. And we're just updating it based on what has happened. As of today's recording, it just happened hours ago. But you guys will hear this in a couple of days. So even our breaking news is not that breaking.
Right. So, yeah, for those of you who were living under a rock, but nevertheless listen to our podcast, Johnny Depp won his defamation case. I think you can say that. Even though Amber Heard won on one count, he won his case. He won it overwhelmingly without question. It was a very strange thing because the jury didn't fill out the damages at first, which I think is interesting. And when I initially heard that, I thought they were going to do de minimis damages, which we talked about, where you say you win, but we're not going to give you anything. Instead, they went back into the jury room. They gave Johnny Depp $10 million compensatory damages and $5 million in punitive damages. That was later reduced down a bit just by action of law because there are limits on how much money you can actually get in these cases. But they don't tell the jury that because they don't want them messing with the amount that they give. So I think it was like $8 million in change total that he's going to get. And then Amber Heard, who won on one count, got $2 million, but, you know, that's obviously going to go against the amount that she's expected to pay Johnny Depp. Alice, what do you think happened here?
So I think it was really telling that the jury went back into the room to fill out the damages and left $0 for punitive damages for Amber Heard. Punitive damages is exactly what it sounds like. It's for punishment purposes, whereas compensatory is to compensate for someone for the loss in reputation. So not getting a job because of the loss in reputation, that's compensated because if not for the defamation, Johnny Depp would have gotten the job. That's the argument. But punitive damages goes beyond that. It creates a windfall for the person who is defamed against. Essentially, punitive damages is saying we are punishing you so that it goes beyond just what you cost this person. You hurt them so badly that you should pay out of your pocket and be punished for defaming the person. So the fact that they gave $5 million in punitive damages to Depp, again, that was then adjusted downwards because of the law, and $0 to Heard, I think tells you everything that you need to know, which is that they thought Johnny Depp was the one who was really hurt in this situation. And Amber Heard, they weren't buying her sob story of being defamed.
And I'll say this, the verdicts are confusing, but they're not inconsistent. So you might think, well, this is who's lying? That's what the question is here. Is Johnny Depp lying or is Amber Heard lying? And it seems like the jury said they're both lying. So how does that work? Well, that's not really it. They're very specific counts about how people were defamed. So Johnny Depp, in general, he was saying that in this op-ed, he was defamed because of everything that Amber Heard said about him in the op-ed. When she counterclaimed, she also had some specific instances of defamation that actually his lawyer was responsible for saying, but at Johnny Depp's sort of behest. I mean, he's speaking on behalf of Johnny Depp. So that's why it's suing Johnny Depp and not his lawyer. One of them, my understanding is that she had exaggerated and possibly even staged a scene to make a fight look worse than it was. And that was the count that the jury awarded on behalf of her. So essentially what they're saying is, look, Johnny Depp was completely defamed by you when you said that he abused you, but he went too far when he said that you did this thing. You didn't do that thing, so you're going to win on that count. But like Alice said, we're only going to give you compensatory damages. We're going to punish you with punitive damages. We're not going to punish Johnny Depp. We're going to make him make you whole, as it were, but we're not going to punish him for what he said. And it really, I mean, this jury said Johnny Depp wins, and Johnny Depp was in the right. That was the position of the jury. I haven't changed my position on this. I don't think either one of them should have won. Even though the verdicts are not inconsistent, there is an inconsistency there. As we said, the law is very difficult in defamation. The bar is very high. Truth is a defense. And when you are a famous person, you're having to show actual malice. You basically have to show that everything the person said isn't true. And when the jury is saying, well, you're both liars, I don't know how you actually meet that bar, but this is also a good reminder for me and a good reminder for all lawyers that when a jury is involved, it's not just about the law. It's not about the cold legal reasoning and here are the elements and here's how you meet it and there's a scale and you're putting evidence on each side and which one balances more. No, these are human beings. And I think these human beings on the jury, they heard Johnny Depp. As I said earlier in this episode, Johnny Depp came off as much more likable. He was much better on the stand. Amber Heard did not. You didn't have to watch much of this, and not just the TikTok stuff, but just any of the time when Amber Heard was testifying. She did not come off well. She came off as though she was. It just seemed fake. And look, that may seem harsh because it's a difficult thing to sit on a stand and answer questions in front of a whole bunch of people and the world. But in a case like this, you guys were the jury as much as anybody. The law is what it is, but it's not that complicated. This is just who do you believe? Who do you believe is telling the truth?
And here, I think the jury actually took their job very seriously and were very careful in how they deliberated. For one, they deliberated for, almost 4 days, which is a relatively long time. I mean, given a 6-week trial, it may not seem that long, but we have seen juries come back within the same day, within a couple of days, even for a long trial, because people tend to have their minds made up by the end of such a long trial, even if they haven't been able to discuss with each other. And the reason I think they took their job very seriously is they awarded compensatory damages. They awarded compensatory damages to Amber Heard almost on a technicality, but they wanted to make clear that they thought Johnny Depp won, that he was the one who was really aggrieved here. But they felt that they had to be consistent in their verdict. If he gets the compensatory damages based on this same standard, then she could meet the standard on certain statements as well, but he doesn't have to pay for it because it was a technicality and they wanted to apply the same standard for both of them. But the place where you can see what they really thought should have been the outcome or who was the winner, you look at the punitive damages.
Yeah, and that's what they did. And you're already seeing people in their reactions, and I don't know what message this sends to people, but as I've said before, I don't think it should really send any message. I think this case is sui generis. I mean, it's a weird one. It's Johnny Depp. Most cases will not be like this. So I hope that people don't take any sort of big picture things away from this, particularly when it comes to abuse and being willing to come forward and speak about abuse. This is obviously a very strange case. This is a case where you have someone who they're not going to the police, they're writing an op-ed in the Washington Post about their ex-husband who is a famous movie star. And I don't think you can draw a lot of, big things from this case. I think this case was crazy. I think it was a made for Hollywood drama. I don't really I like Johnny Depp as an actor. I don't really think Amber Heard's a very good actress, but that doesn't really have anything to do with this, and I just don't think either one of these people should have won, and that's kind of my position on it, but obviously the jury did not agree with me, and I know a lot of you guys don't agree with me. I think overwhelmingly the people that I've seen talking about this think that Johnny Depp should have won and are glad that he won. So, for those of you who feel that way, congratulations. He pulled it off in the end, and he got a lot of money that I didn't think he was going to get. It's probably not a lot of money to Johnny Depp, but what he won was what we've been talking about. He won his reputation back. I think basically Johnny Depp can move forward at this point with essentially no reputational damage. Amber Heard, I don't know what this is going to do to her career. I think it could be rough. It depends on how she plays it. It'll be interesting to see, but fortunately, that's not something we're going to worry about because we're not entertainment podcasters. So you guys can let us know how it's working out with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard in the future, but it was an interesting case and the outcome certainly was intriguing.
Yeah, Brett, I think that's right. This is a one-off case. Don't take your defamation suits principles by this case. They essentially weaponized the love of this isn't crime, but the true crime genre of loving to follow trials in real time and an oh snap moment of famous people on the stand. And that's what they got. And they both honestly weaponized kind of the media's full attention on otherwise what would be a pretty boring trial. And it worked out for Johnny Depp. He rolled the dice and he won. And I think he'd been winning for the past several weeks. And the verdict was just a cherry on top of what he had set out to do, which is to reclaim his reputation. So we're on a rock and roll start, Brett. Our very first episode, and we get it dead wrong.
Dead wrong. Completely wrong. But like Alice said, at least we're honest with you about it. There has to be something to say for that. I mean, I was like, we're totally re-recording, and Alice said, no, we won't do that.
Yeah,
so,
right, Brett. It was the other way around. Thank you for not throwing me under the bus. But what you get to see is how we think through this. Because I will say, I think a lot of people thought that neither side would win. Those of us who are following it with a eye towards the legal standard. And so you've gotten to see how we've thought through it all along. And you had our real impressions before we knew what the verdict were. And now we have kind of the update within the episode so you can hear us process our mistakes, which, by the way, I go through every single day with some sort of, processing some sort of mistake. So this is just another day.
That's the law for you. And that's what you get for trying to predict what a jury's going to do. And I think this was sort of a rough justice thing. And we talked about this on the other podcast. We talked about how juries work. And typically I think they get to the right answer. I think they're wrong on the law, but I'm being a little technical. I think probably in the grand scheme of things, based on what we've seen, Johnny Depp probably is more in the right than Amber Heard. I think Amber Heard probably did say a lot of things about him that were false. And that last bit of audio they played where she says, tell the world you were abused and see if they believe you. I think that was pretty powerful. And I think there was something about that made the jury want to say, yeah, we are going to say that we believed him. And that's where we ended up. And even if that relationship was really bad on both sides, at the end of the day, they decided Johnny Depp's the one who's more in the right, and that's what they said. Well, guys, I think this will be the last we say about Johnny Depp. Can we make that promise, Alice? No more Johnny Depp?
Sure. Yes, let's do it now because we got an extra long first episode. This is the last for a very, very long time, unless you guys write in with questions, and then
and you never know. There could be an appeal.
There could be an appeal.
Could be an appeal. Unlikely to be successful. If it's successful, we'll do an update. In addition to talking about what's in the news, we want to do our continuing legal education, our CLE, for all of our listeners. And today we're going to talk about jury size. We've said before, and you all know, criminal juries are 12 people. But civil juries don't have to have 12. And in fact, in this case, there are 7 jurors. So 7 jurors will be deciding this case. I believe it's 4 men and 3 women. And the number of jurors you have in civil cases varies by jurisdiction, varies by state, varies by whether you're in a federal court. This case is being tried in Virginia State Court. You may be wondering why that is. Why Virginia and not California? My understanding is there's something called an anti-SLAPP law, which is strategic litigation against public participation. And when you have those, in order to bring defamation, it's just one more hurdle you have to cover. You have to show that your lawsuit about defamation is not meant to stop someone from participating in the public discourse, as they are, of course, allowed to do. California has an anti-SLAPP statute. Virginia does not. So by bringing this case in Virginia, you don't have to worry about that statute.
Indeed. So, we didn't know how long our episodes would be, but I think based on our verboseness and also how much there is to talk about this case, we have already gone over what we thought these episodes would be. Well, Brett, is there anything else you'd like to add before we close out for our first episode of Legal Briefs?
Just that I'm so excited to do this. This one might have been a little rough. We'll try and do better in the future. So glad you guys are coming along for this ride. I hope that you will reach out to us, prosecutorspod@gmail.com, with any cases you want to hear. We want to hear from you. We want to cover what you want to hear. This is a breaking news program. Not really that breaking. It's
I
once
was
a
going to
week.
say, Brett, maybe skidding. We're like getting into it.
We're getting into it, a current events program. So let us know what you want us to talk about, and we will do it.
Well, thanks, Brett, and thank you all for joining us on our first episode of the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. As we mentioned earlier, if you're interested in the true crime storytelling, check us out at the Prosecutor's Podcast. But here at Legal Briefs, we're going to try to cover current events. But we have the same email, same Twitter handle, same Instagram. So reach out to us at prosecutorspod@gmail.com. Check us out on all the social media platforms at prosecutorspod. Until next time, I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. Just about to say, I'm Brett. All right. Here we go. How do you start? Do you start with, I am Brett?
I'm Brett, and I'm Alice, and we are the prosecutors.
Okay, here we go. I'm Alice. Don't laugh.
Okay.
I'll start again.
I'm ready. Okay. I'm ready this time.
Hey, everyone.
Woo! I'll just put, you'll never have to say it again.
Okay, thank you. Thank God.